All right, so I'm David Estes. I'm actually the VP of Engineering of Morpheus. I'm also the co-founder of Morpheus. Been working on the product since its inception. So I'm going to give you guys a demo of how the self-service provisioning works. We're going to kind of talk about some of the architecture behind that and the concepts. So this is probably the best time to dive right into the tool, and a lot of those questions you guys asked earlier, you'll see how some of that starts to come together. So to get started, this is not showing on the screen, so one second here. This is basically the demo environment of our Morpheus platform. You actually see, this is your dashboard you get right at the start. You get a nice status, like how many instances are in your account, how many open incidents there are for monitoring and log trends, as well as backup trends as well. So all that data gets aggregated to you. There's also a nice recent activity that gives you a nice audit log. You can get more detail on your availability of the applications you've got running in Morpheus, things like that. In this demo, so we have things constantly going up and down, so that's why you see the red X right now or something like that. There's probably an instance that's turned off or shut down.
Is this view filtered by like what you're allowed to access in the environment?
Mm-hmm. Looks like I got logged out while I was sitting there. So.
And where is this running?
This is running in your own environment, so you can run this on your own EC2 instances. It's not SaaS-based, it's an install. So you can deploy it in a high availability scenario, or you can deploy it all in one. It actually takes about 15 minutes. We distribute it as a Debian or a Yum package. So you can run it on your Red Hat Enterprise, your Ubuntu, things like that.
And where do people normally run it? Do they normally run it in
depends
the
on
cloud
the
and
customer.
connect to the, that's variable, is it?
Yeah, you can do that. Some people will do it on-premise just because they may have a networking requirement with how they access the vCenter APIs. Maybe it's locked out from the public cloud, things like that. So it does vary, but you can do both. We have one that's running it hybrid, cross-region, OpenStack, and Azure, because you can run it in a cross-regional HA environment as well. It takes a little bit more than 15 minutes to set it up in that scenario, though. I'm not going to claim 15 minutes on that one. Okay, so going to provisioning instances, this is kind of the view of just basic instance provisioning. You see if I scroll down, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. There's a Redis instance. There's some Azure database as a service running SQL Server, just generic operating systems, things like that. So these are instances. They're kind of representative of a service, you would say. It's not necessarily a single container, a single VM, a single box. It can represent a database service. It can actually represent multiple VMs or multiple containers. So if I were to go to provision one, I'm going to hit add here. You get this service catalog. And you see it's got a lot of options in here. One cool thing Morpheus does provide is 49 of these out of the box with high availability configurations, best in breed in that scenario based on our experience. Like you can do a Mongo sharded replica set in here and a full cluster, and it will handle that, as well as day two operations of that cluster. But this list can be completely customized. You can take that out, add your own stuff, and move on from there. So, and a lot of times our customers will take it out, but it's great for getting started, things like that.
I don't see anything related to cost on there. Is that something that you're
Yes.
exposing to people?
It's on here, and I'll get into that here in a minute. Okay. So when you pick one, cost you can't determine necessarily from a single catalog item because it depends on where it's placed. So for example, say I want to deploy MySQL. You can see here I have these three icons over here. These represent the technology that's supported. I can deploy this catalog item in Docker, bare metal, or as a VM. I'm going to hit next. Now, next thing you can do is you can pick a group, and we'll get into groups later. We're going to talk about policy and governance. Group is a way to organize your instances, but you can also apply policies and role-based access control against these. So we have an all clouds demo group, and then we have a cloud selection. So you can mix and match your cloud integrations to groups. Let's say I were to pick AWS California. This is a good example for pricing, showing you that. One thing you will notice is the name is pre-filled in. That's a naming policy. Another thing with governance that we can get into. And I'm going to hit next. Now, when you provision this, you notice this configuration screen actually changes based on your target, talking about that least common denominator or the generic types of things. So if we switch to, say, 5.6 here, we can do multiple versions. You can also define multiple configurations or layouts. So you can see it knows that I can deploy this as a Docker container in this environment. It knows I can deploy an RDS instance of this. It knows that I can just do an EC2 instance as well. And you'll notice some of the configurations also let you do master-slave, multi-master replication out of the box. So if I pick an Amazon master instance, you'll see I can pick a plan. What flavor, what size do I want? This can be configured with role-based access control and lockdown as well. Say I pick a T2 medium. You'll notice you'll get your cost down here. Price is $45.20 a month. I can even get cost comparison.
Where are you getting that cost data from?
So for the public clouds, we sync it nightly. So on your environment, we'll actually talk to the pricing APIs of Amazon or Azure and do a nightly sync of that data. Some of them do not support getting your discounted prices. Some of the clouds don't support that on their APIs. I think Azure is one of them right now. But what you can do is, as a customer, you can go in and add overrides to the price table. So you can modify it. You can also completely customize it for your own premise. But we do provide some defaults just to give you kind of relative pricing differentiation.
So seeing is this private data center stuff where it has Nutanix and OpenStack, that's my built cost,
Right.
whatever I estimated as the cost for this type of workload. So what happens when you choose something that's not a OS and VM-based solution like RDMS?
Like RDS. So
RDS, yes.
So that pricing, a lot of it's based on the flavor, and a lot of services have flavors or plans that are not necessarily associated with compute. So we use that to give you the cost estimate.
So is it the same like a month? So if I'm a developer or if I'm an application team and I want to deploy a dev environment and I want to experiment in pricing to understand as I move through my environments, which is the best prediction of cost? How do I guess the short end question is, how do I predict cost when I'm comparing to traditional VM-based infrastructure versus native service?
Yeah. So an example of that, and I can go into it a little bit more later as well, is like we're showing price per month right here, right? Actually billed per hour in Amazon, per second in some cases. So what we do is we always translate it to a per month cost. So if you're looking at a comparison for a containerized architecture versus a VM, we'll do that for you. You can also change it in the administrative settings what you want to represent as your baseline time period for that. So when you get to do a cost comparison, you're seeing it in the same time unit. That's typically what we do.
Can you predetermine where the target would be? So if you wanted to say, if you're deploying a production instance, then it goes to my on-prem VMware. But if I'm deploying dev test, it goes to AWS. But you want to abstract that away from the development team, whoever's deploying it. They don't care. You've made that decision for them.
Yes.
Rather than giving them this list.
Yeah, so we do that when we start talking about multi-tiered application stacks and app templates. So I'll go into the template structure here in a little bit. You can lock fields down so they can't even change it. You can scope configuration by environment. You can even configure an app template that's hybrid cloud or based on target environment deploys to an entirely different cloud, maybe on-prem VMware or on-premises VMware.
Where did the on-prem values for that come from? So for example, in your list for the different on-prem components.
Typically it's
how did
user
you
entered.
Okay.
We do provide an initial default price set that has like a relative one, kind of like a Turbonomics would. It's not necessarily accurate, but what it does give you is when you start doing comparisons of deployments or tier sizes, it gives you a relative cost kind of estimate so you can kind of visualize that. But typically what we have happen is customers go in and change that data, or managed service providers will use that often to kind of associate a front level cost.
I'm not sure if this question was asked or not, but I don't want to drive this from a GUI. I want to write code that does this.
Yep, and we can do that, and I will get to that actually towards the end of this demo. There's a CLI where all of this can be done, and a public developer API.
Okay.
So let me get that out of the way here. So when I picked this Amazon instance, you'll notice I get a few options. I can pick my disk structure, I can pick provisioned IOPS, all that type of stuff that's specific to Amazon starts showing up, right? I can leave that alone. I can pick a network. You can even do network group. So this Labs Public AWS is a network group containing 1A and 1C, so it'll round robin provision across that. So you can handle cross availability zone provisioning types things. You can pick a security group, just like you could, and most environments have security groups. We support this for Amazon, OpenStack, Azure, all the public clouds, and Cisco ACI. Or we can even do internal firewall management. If you have none of those tools and you want to do some type of firewalling, you can do that. So I'm going to give my database an initial set of credentials here. And there's some advanced options here. For example, you can have it automatically create your users. Say you want to automatically create an initial user to be on the box, you can do that. Configure DNS, like joining a Windows domain or registering with your Route 53, things like that, you can configure. Metadata is like your AWS tagging. So say you've got a company that has strict policies on what kind of tags they need. You can enter that data here, or you can actually create custom input options that show up on this wizard that are strictly enforced. So they can pick from a drop-down of like a department or something like that. And those lists can be entered manually into the system, or they can be dynamic where they can reach out to an external tool and actually be aggregated that way via APIs. So when we hit next here, we get into the automation step. One cool thing, and we'll get a little bit more into this later, is you can actually build workflows. And these workflows can have phased scripts that run at different parts of provisioning. There's pre-provision, provision, there's whenever a resize or reconfigure happens, code deployment, tear down, post-provision, those types of things happen. You can build workflows that have those assembled together. You can pick one that maybe does a Chef Bootstrap or runs an Ansible playbook or does a salt call, things like that. Or they can be PowerShell scripts or Bash, any of those types of things. Webhooks, maybe it reaches out into Sharewell. For example, say we don't have Sharewell integration, you want to just reach out and register with CMDB, you can build a workflow that does that. So this is one of those areas of extensibility without needing a direct integration.
Quick question on that. Where do those workflows run from?
Where do they run from?
Yeah. So they run on the instance where Morpheus is installed?
It depends. So they will run on the Morpheus instance if it's an on-box thing, but if it's run on the target machine, sometimes you've got a bash script you may want to run on the target VM you're spinning up, it will go out to that and run it. It'll do that over an agent communication bus, or it'll do it over SSH or WinRM, things like that.
Okay. I was just trying to think in terms of scale. So as the workflows scale to a larger environment, how capable is the Morpheus potential single instance capable of handling those calls at the same time?
Yeah, very. And a lot of it is because of that agent architecture, similar to how Salt solved it with minions. We basically do a similar architecture.
I'm really impressed with like all the providers and services you connect to, but with your product going forward, how are you looking at GDPR and either surfacing more reporting tools for the companies that buy your product so they can be compliant?
Reporting. So we are actually currently in a feature set where we're actually expanding our report tooling. So exportability of data, being able to run that through third-party reporting tools has kind of been a focus. We're not there yet, and I don't have anything to show you on that side yet, and we'll show you some of the reporting we do have. You can export a lot of this data via the APIs and stuff like that. And we do have a couple of customers that also do that.
Okay, is it GDPR specific reporting?
I'm not
or?
sure.
It's not GDPR specific. I mean,
Okay.
we're not storing any customer data or anything like that. But I think one of the things that does come up from a compliance perspective is, if you're managing across, all those multiple cloud deployments, how do you, keep track of your user accounts? So I think having a single point of standardization that integrates with your local ID management, and then obfuscates having to manage that across a bunch of different clouds is one of the compliance
Right.
kind of use cases that does come up in having a centralized cloud management stack.
I noticed on that list there's an option to uninstall the Morpheus Agent. What's that?
So when Morpheus provisions compute, it normally installs an agent on there. Think of like VMware installs VMware tools, or CloudWatch, you have to install cron jobs to send stuff to CloudWatch. That agent gets installed after. One of the cool things about Morpheus is some of our competitors require an agent. Some of them have to require them to be pre-installed on the images you're provisioning. Morpheus does not. It does it during the provisioning phase. It's also optional. So Morpheus will use that as a way to collect guest level statistics, memory usage, CPU usage, file system awareness, things like that, things you can't get from the hypervisor level. It will send that back, or syslog aggregation when we start tying into logging. The other piece it can also do is provide a command bus, and it allows Morpheus to send orchestration automation events, and it works similar to how a minion does in Salt. That agent, though, if it is not installed, we have graceful fallback. So if you want to start running Bash or WinRM workflows on an instance that does not have that agent, and we'll talk about Brownfield as well, it will use SSH, it will use WinRM, it will use those types of toolings to do that.
Okay.
How do you manage upgrades to that agent?
Typically, when an instance is run, First off, the agent's actually pretty backwards compatible. We don't have to update it very often. The other thing you do is you can go into the infrastructure host page and you can actually bulk upgrade agent, or you can do that from the CLI, things like that. It'll tell you if there's a new version available, or you can leave it alone, things like that.
So do you have a kind of a report for that, and then you can go off and provision that and schedule it and those kind of things?
Yes, exactly. So it's a filter.
And presumably, is there some kind of provisioning process for container hosts that puts that agent in?
Yes. So when you're running
into the containers.
So containers don't need the agent. That's one cool thing. The way we do the agent for container hosts is we install it on the host. And then we use that one agent to manage the statistical aggregation of all the containers. So,
How do you handle, so you deploy an instance with this template, and then you have a bunch of instances that were deployed by this template. Now you need to make a change to the way those instances are functioning. Can you update the template and retroactively push that to all the instances created from that template?
right, yes, you can. And it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing, say, VM architecture where you've got long-running VMs, you're not going to just tear them down and rebuild them, right? When you define a catalog, you can define the versions, and you can also define upgrade actions. And those upgrade actions, basically, if you're going from, say, 5.6 to 5.7 of MySQL, maybe you have a custom script you want to run because you can't swap out the template. You can build out a workflow script that runs the equivalent upgrade and applies it to that VM.
If you wanted to do something more immutable where you're rolling out a new version of that VM, does Morpheus have a way to sort of get the load balancer involved so you can gracefully fail over to the new instance without downtime?
So that's another thing. If you're doing horizontal scaling, say I'm doing a Tomcat server and I've got two different versions of a base image, right? Patching's been done. When you do the upgrade, your script that you may have may exist. It runs or it doesn't. If it doesn't run and you've done the upgrade, your other VMs will still be sitting on that old one. But when you start doing horizontal scaling, say add node or auto scaling, it'll start filling in and replacing with the new version automatically once you've initiated that upgrade. And then you can phase out those old versions. And we talk to that load balance when we rolling restart, or we notify and take things out of service automatically for you.
What about rollback when things go horribly wrong?
You can do that to a point with regards to upgrades. You can do it with code deploys. Another good way to do it is to do a clone. So you can actually take your instance and clone it, and then do the upgrade testing on that, and do the swap out on the load balancer, things like that.
So I have a question about the GUI seems fiddly to me, in that it exposes all of the expert options, which is good. Like it is annoying to have things which immediately go into dummy mode, and I can't turn off all of the stupid guardrails which get in my way. But am I able to set this up so that it has sensible defaults, so that I don't have to click 70 billion buttons every time I want to spin up an instance? I want to just say, I would like some computer, please, and go. And
that's at the heart. The problem with these sorts of technologies is that there's always that tension between the abstraction, which is meant to simplify your world, and then people who want lots of knobs and buttons to press. And as soon as you take away the knobs and buttons that people like us like to touch, you feel like you're being wrapped up in cotton wool. And what I think people don't realize is that these two are polar extremes to each other. You can't have your cake and eat it with this sort of situation.
It's a dynamic tension, yeah. Well, that's why we went with cloud, is that you don't have...
Unless there's some sort of policy engine or some sort of template which abstracts all that complexity away, all you're doing is moving the complexity to another level. I've got all this complexity now in this overlay. Shouldn't be the whole point of abstraction to make it simple to take away those buttons?
Because like if I'm a developer, which is where I was going with my API question, is that as a developer, I don't care. Like I don't want to know the intricacies of Amazon instances. I shouldn't have to know any of this stuff. Some of the things that I should know is how much is this going to cost me per month, and will this satisfy the requirements of my need? As long as it's good enough and the price is right, I am totally going to do that, which is how Amazon became so popular, because otherwise I had to do all of this whenever I made a request of IT to go provision me a thing.
And this links back to a question that you asked earlier, can I hide some of this stuff based on the type of person who they are, because I do not want to bombard my developers with all these choices
I
and
would
questions.
guess, being fair to these guys, this
They haven't got
demo
to
is
that
trying to show
point.
you everything.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, the two things I was going to say is A, you guys are all spot on in your agenda. Governance and role-based access is kind of the next section we probably should transition to just so we don't run out of time. And B, this is the, kimono open, all clouds, all options, every nerd knob you'd ever want.
Yep.
Because it's our SA demo environment. When we go through governance, we can actually impersonate one of our multi-tenant setups where we locked poor Dinesh at Pied Piper down to you can do one thing and the one thing only. That is all you got.
So before governance, the functions and event-driven compute, how do you guys handle functions and events?
We currently don't do functions as a service. It's on our roadmap right now.
Yeah, we've got the roadmap section at the end. Maybe we can dig into.
There are reasons for that. There are limited on-prem solutions for that right now. So you're kind of tied into a lock-in. And functions as a service is still very young in its development cycle. So,
But just to top and tail the discussion we were having a moment ago, people have bought one round of abstraction tools to simplify their environment, and now they're going to overlay on top of that another layer of abstraction to simplify the thing that didn't simplify the thing the first time around. And that makes me worried.
Makes
It
me
makes
want to
me
use
nervous.
regular expressions.
It makes me nervous that I could be ingesting another layer of abstraction, and in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, I'll be introducing yet another layer of abstraction to sit on top of that because it wasn't adopted. And I think somebody made a very valid point at the very beginning is you can bring a tool like this in, but can you bring them, you can drive, that phrase about make a horse drink, you can drive it to water.
Yeah.
You can provide this tool, but how do you make people actually use it, which was your very early point.
And that's got to be as much as anything is the education. It's got to be desirable for people to use.
right. And I actually do want to show one other thing before we get into governance.
I guess one reason that people don't adopt is they go, well, it doesn't have the knobs and nerds that I'm used to, and I don't like those being taken away from me. So I'm going to go around this abstraction to the original tool that did expose that.
But and I guess that's kind of where my question's going is, if you're exposing all of the knobs, it's like, well, I can go and just play with the knobs. Why am I using your tool to do all? So the abstraction exists for a reason. And it has all of these capabilities, and I guess part of where I'm going is to understand, why am I using this thing? Why does this abstraction exist? What is the power that it provides me that I wouldn't normally have?
Right. So that's where we get into templating and multi-tiered applications and governance as well. So there's a couple pieces. One is you have to have all these knobs to be able to govern them, and you don't want people to lose control. That's the exact kind of reason why we have these knobs.
Yep.
If you tighten it down too much, people aren't going to want to use the tool. So you have to provide a way so that they can self-service use them, but still limit what aspects of those knobs they can change. And you also have to give it the simple, some people I just want compute and that's it. I don't want all the knobs. So I'm going to show you that. So we're just talking about creating a single instance here, right?
So David, can I just ask, just while you start doing that, I think we've missed a point, and the fact that a lot of the people in this room are probably keen on infrastructure and like being able to change all the settings. Developers probably just don't care.
Right.
They want what you do. Give me that VM.
Exactly.
I don't really care. As long as it's got the things I need within it, that's it. So I really think it depends on the audience.
Right, and that's why you have multiple.
If there's anything, and I think a lot of us in this room are infrastructure based, and we get too focused on the infrastructure.
So I think taking that point, there are actually 3 personas that come into play here. One is the infrastructure admin, the second is the developer, and the third is the executive.
Yeah.
Right. So
we have a slide with that.
You just described there 3 the guys in ties, the ops guys, and the devs. That's our.
Because at the end of the day, there is you have to understand, kind of to your point, or to Justin's point, is what's the value in this for the developer, and then separately, what's the value in this for the infrastructure admin, and then separately, why am I writing a check for this from an executive standpoint? What does this buy me? And that's where I was kind of curious about Jeff's question about GDPR is, so does this potentially help guide in that realm? Because there's a level of complexity that comes with that I don't think most people grok or understand or the depth of.
good stranger in a strange land reference is hard to come by, so
Yes.
I appreciate that. It also gets misused a lot by people who've never read the book. But no, those 3 personas definitely are. I mean, we kind of dived into the nerd knob side, but the way we kind of structured the flow even today, the governance side really is where we try and appeal to the ops team who doesn't want to be the police state, but is in charge of managing SLAs and keeping the ship running in the right direction. Some of the automation stuff that Tim's going to go to, if we can get to it, is really more around native API, tying into Jenkins, doing your deploys, and then one of the things we just kind of held back on because there's just not enough time. We could literally stay here for 6 hours. Is on the on the guys in ties, the business side, some of the analytics, the reporting, the right sizing. I mean, as base level of walking into an environment, we were at a large retailer, late last fall, and just said, hey, let's get a scale of what we're talking about. And the guy on the left said, I think we're at about 10,000 VMs. The guy across the table said, no, we're at like 35,000. I mean, just base level, what do I have and how much does it cost is oftentimes what people need. And so we try and appeal to the different personas based on what their project and problem is.
I was just going to say, as an infrastructure person or an operator, I do like the interface. I know it exposes a lot of toggles and controls that a dev wouldn't care about. But in a lot of environments, the dev may not even want to get into this interface. He might just come to an operations team, and it seems pretty thoughtful and comprehensive to me.
I think depending on where people are in their maturity curve from a DevOps, is it handoffs or is it fully democratized? One of the things we've seen is
so
it is as much people and process as tools and technology. This kind of helps people get further along that maturity curve depending on where they're at.
I'm not sure how I understood your product. So you are monitoring multi-cloud IaaS infrastructure. Are you also monitoring the PaaS infrastructure?
Yes.
Because you told us that you didn't implement for FaaS.
Right, but we do PaaS, so like Cloud Foundry.
But is it possible to put Prometheus over your solution to monitoring the FaaS of the web?
The FaaS part?
Yeah.
Not yet, but we are looking into it for FaaS. But for PaaS, we do.
And what is your difference between Morpheus and Prometheus? Because Prometheus implement for the machine and the PaaS and the FaaS solutions.
What tool?
Prometheus.
I'm not familiar.
Prometheus?
This is a cloud native project just after
Prometheus
Kubernetes.
for monitoring containers.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we will tie into some of those tools. So we're focused on monitoring right now, right? Is that correct?
Okay.
So we do have a monitoring tool built in. I didn't have time to get into that. There are also extensions to that where you can actually reach out and tie into those types of tools or automate, setting up the automation or setting up the performance monitoring setups you would need to do, that kind of thing. Real quick, I think we are running a little short on time on my section. Brad's giving me the look.
I love it. No, this is great. I'm just trying to keep us moving. There's a lot to go.
Yeah, so I didn't get to cover, we tried to provision that MySQL instance. I normally take that all the way through, but in the interest of time, that was just trying to show you the building blocks, the knobs and things like that. Now you'll notice if I build a more complex app template, and this could be set up by someone in your DevOps team, typically this would be someone in DevOps. These templates can have multiple configurations by environments. You can scope them, like this is a 2-tier MySQL Tomcat application. So I can define how it deploys in different environments, right? I can also get a visual representation of what that's going to look like, what the network communication between the hosts are. I can also tie in infrastructure as code and build this with YAML or JSON or HCL, things like that. So, and that kind of goes into our CLI as well and our API. Now, what also is cool, we talked about, can I take things out? I don't want the user to care about all these things. So you'll notice once these are set up, you can lock fields and set defaults. You can also do this at a policy level, but all these values are being set up in the template as a default so that when the developer goes to use it, they don't care. So I can close this, and that's just a 2-tier application. I'm going to show you how to deploy it. If I were to go into apps and actually deploy an application, say I pick that Spud marketing app, right? So you get a service catalog for your apps.
That's cool.
and I can say it's a test app or like Cloud Field Day or Tech Field Day. I can pick a group, like where am I going to deploy this? I'm going to deploy it in All Clouds Demo, and I'm going to deploy it in AWS California. I'm going to hit Next. Now, there's the preview of the application. I can drill in and change things that are not locked, but frankly, they're all there, so I can just hit Go. Now, what I didn't get into is those tiers. You can define boot sequence, so it knows that it has to build the database before the web servers come online. In this case, it's doing it all as AWS EC2 as an example. So it's actually deploying a database, deploying an initial data set, because Morpheus is also able to do code deployments, or in this case, source data. And then once that's up and running, say if I drill into MySQL, you can see it gives you an estimated time, how long that's going to take. That's actually based on your infrastructure. So it's estimating that based on historical and based on the catalog item. It's telling you what phase it's in, so you get a nice history. I didn't get to drill into these details. You get statistics here as well. All that type of information you need. Your logs will start showing up here. So say your Tomcat server is having issues from a self-service perspective, your developer can go in and hit logs and just get a really easy way to kind of figure out what's going on.
So you mentioned it handles code deploys as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to deploying code, oftentimes you need to maybe run a database migration potentially after you deploy your code, or in like a multi-stage step. How do you handle that with your platform?
So when you do code deploys, they don't necessarily have to just be a code pack. They can actually be associated scripts. So you can actually run scripts as part of the deployment process. So you'll notice these yellow items here. It says it's actually going to be shutting down in 23 hours and going away in 23 hours. You can actually set expiration policies on groups or clouds. So say you have a dev group. A common use case is we have people who have dev groups where they give them 30 days to kind of mess around. And they have the option to extend it, of course, or remove that policy. But it's to keep people from just running away with resources, that kind of thing. We do this for our sales engineers so they don't take away all our VMware, for example.
So on the topic of developers, I mean, we've been talking more about large-scale corporations as your target audience, but could the developer who knows a little bit about, oh, I've set up a DigitalOcean server, I know a little bit about Ansible, like I'm ready for some big boy tooling. I mean, would that work well for your
Big boy tooling?
Big boy tooling.
I mean,
Big boy pants.
that was one of the
like
original targets. A lot of our engineers who built this tool are the people who wear many hats. So we wanted a tool.
So small teams.
Yeah, where we could manage
Big boy tooling with many hats.
the big boy tooling, right?
Is that a hashtag, big boy tooling?
It should be, right? So now I drill into this application detail page. I'm going to get more statistics on this. It's going to build monitoring and set monitor checks for all this. Eventually, you can see this is in a pending state, our Tomcat. All three of those. It's actually set to do a scale factor of 3. So it's going to deploy 3 EC2 instances. Once those are complete, that application template also has a configuration to create an ELB in Amazon and tie that all together and register DNS with Route 53. So end to end, that template is deploying an application, setting up all the monitoring, all the logging.
Is there a marketplace of these templates available so you don't have to start from scratch if you want to develop one?
From the app templates, we don't right now. We've thought about doing that. We had a few in there. The problem is everyone has different architectures. Like I could do originally we had like a Rails template for like Rails architecture, Ruby on Rails. But do you put Postgres behind that or do you put MySQL? Like what is your data backend? So really though, it takes you about 5 minutes to build a Rails template or less than that. So, but we are looking at adding
like Ansible Galaxy where it's just community generated.
Right. We haven't done that yet. And to be honest, this new multi-tier app template structure that we've built here is only 3 months old. This is one of the newer. We had an app template system before this. This is kind of like a year's worth of work that we finally released at the beginning, actually, of this year. So.
Okay.
And there are template types I can go into as well. I do need to probably move on. But another thing we do support is ARM templates as well as Terraform templates. And we're going to be adding CloudFormation. These are brand new, so I have to go into my local environment. But you can actually, when you build a template, there's a Terraform template right there. But I can add different template types. And what happens is when I define a different template type, say I define this one, the wizard changes. Now I can actually paste my TF file in there, or I can link it to a GitHub integration and version control it and automatically pull and manage my TF state. The same goes with ARM templates as well. That's kind of the developer audience target right there is kind of what you're seeing when we start building onto that.
Well, I don't know. That's changed, certainly in my organization. Terraform is a tool used by the infrastructure team.
Right. Yeah, and that's why we did it. We did it for those people who are already using Terraform. But as you kind of learn Morpheus, you'll find you don't really need Terraform to do the same kinds of things you can do with the Morpheus tooling. But if you want to use it, you can.
That's a big claim.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Well, he did say they support basically text-based or YAML-based deployments, which is the issue with a lot of tools from other vendors is that they don't support that YAML or JSON input. in
And
an
we
effective
support
manner.
HCL stuff as well. So HashiCorp configuration language. I think in the IP sheet you guys have, it actually talks about we contribute to a lot of open source projects, and one of those is an HCL project as well. So.